What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and today again I invite you to grab a seat, a beverage, and a snack, and let me talk at you for a minute. Now, as I am nearing completion of 2 of the 3 warbands that I have for this game, we're going to talk about Kings of War Champions. So Champions, from what I can observe, is Mantic's take on the concept of Spearhead and Combat Patrol, where you have a preset list of 3 to 5 units and a hero, and then you take those preset lists and duke it out using the Kings of War system. So it is rank and flank, but much smaller scale. So much so that it plays on a 2x4, so a very long, narrow board. The game uses exclusively D6s, which makes sense given that it's baby Kings of War Light, however you choose to look at it. Modifiers are to the roll, not to the stat, and they are cumulative, so definitely want to keep that in mind while scooting your bricks around the board. Like in Kings of War, the game does recommend multi-basing. I don't like multi-basing because it limits the versatility of the models. So what I've done with mine is I've put them on the appropriate size square bases, and then I cut metal, thin sheet metal, like 22 gauge sheet metal plates to glue to the top of the provided MDF bases, and then all I have to do is put magnets on the bottom of the small bases, and everything can lock in. And then I can have it in a brick for easy movement for this game, but I can also take those same models and use them for Dragons, Rampant, or OPR, or a skirmish game, or whatever. The game does use stat cards, and you are provided with all of the stat cards you need for the army that you purchase. Now, you could look at the list if you already have existing armies collections. You could absolutely look through and then track down the stat cards everywhere. But if you buy the boxes, they do come with the stat cards, and since it's Mantic, they're most likely to stay up to date and valid for a good long while. Like Kings of War, you have facings and arcs. You have a front, a rear, a left flank, and a right flank. And you have a unit leader point, which is usually going to be the front edge, middle of the base. They do provide you with an arc tool in this two-player set. It looks like this to help you establish what those arcs are, because it's a 45 off the corner of the base. It's not straight out. It is an arc. Units in terrain can block your line of sight, but if you have a clear line from your leader point to any part on that base, then it's not blocked. As long as it doesn't, cross another unit or terrain or anything like that. You can measure anything anytime you want, and you gotta stay outside of an inch of enemies unless you are charging them. A round of play is divided into 5 phases. The champion phase, which is where both players will issue their orders and any special rules that happen during that phase. And then the turn, where the attacker will go through these 3 phases first, followed by the defense. They are the movement phase, the ranged phase, and the combat phase, in which once both players have done that, play moves to the end phase. In the command phase, you will issue faction orders, which are a set of tokens that you place face down beside units. You can't use them on champions. Each one will do a different thing or give an effect that will last for the duration of the round. You can also save tokens to use as nerve rerolls, which is the morale system for the game. Once they've all been placed or set aside to use as rerolls, then they get flipped over and you can see what everybody's going to be doing. If you choose to set one aside, it is used to roll a single dice during the nerve test. During your movement phase, you have several options for what to do with your units. You can halt, so they don't move at all. You can change their facing, which means they stay in the same spot but can pivot to face any direction. You can advance, which is a straightforward up to their inches, allowing for 2 pivots of up to 90 degrees. You can go backwards at half speed with 1 pivot up to 90. You can sidestep, which is straight left or straight right, equal to your speed. You can add the double, which is straight forward at double your speed, and you can make 2 pivots along that route as well. Or you can charge. Charge we go into later because it's the most involved of the different options of movement. So when moving, you can move through friendly units freely. You cannot move through enemies. When you pivot, however, you're allowed to pivot through friends, enemies, and all types of terrain. You just have to end the pivot clear of anything blocking and outside of that inch if it's an enemy unit. And then we're going to dig into the charging process. So there is a list of things, prerequisites that have to be in place for you in order for you to be able to charge. They got to be at least partially in your front arc. You got to be able to draw a line of sight to them from your leader point. The distance between your front facing and their closest point must be equal to or less than double your move speed. That's your charge range. You have to have enough space for the unit to be physically placed into contact, and another friendly unit cannot have already charged the same facing. You can have multiples charge the same unit, but not the same facing of that unit. And when charging, there are some slight differences to moving. For example, you have to go around any units or terrain. That's friend or foe. You can't move through friendlies on your way to a charge. And of course, that's referring to blocking terrain. If there is terrain that would slow you down or anything like that, you got to go through it. The pivots can't be used to dodge around that stuff. It won't slow your movement, but it will cause the charge to become hindered, which will be a penalty when you get to the fight phase. We then make our contact, align ourselves to the side that we're making, and then we slide until our leader point is at the middle of whichever side we were charging into, whether that be front, back, or one of the flanks. When determining which of those arcs you're charging into, it's the one that your base is mostly inside of. So if you're majority into their side flank, you charge that. If you're majority into their front, you charge that. When you get there, if there are extra enemies around, those are nudged to just outside that 1-inch bubble, I believe. If you want to overwhelm your opponent with massive numbers, you can charge, as I mentioned, you can charge multiple units in. They just have to go into different facings, and they have to all be given the charge order to go at that target simultaneously. So all of those movements are handled at the same time. You can't do it and then come back later and be like, oh, well, I'm going to charge these fellows in two. All of that has to be sorted at the same time. We have 4 kinds of terrains: blocking terrain, difficult terrain, woods and forests, and obstacles. So blocking terrain cannot be moved through, cannot be pivoted through, and blocks all line of sight. Difficult terrain stops units from being able to move at the double. If you charge through it or end a charge on it, the charge will count as hindered. It does not block line of sight and does not provide cover, as it is considered to be flat. So there's going to be things like wheat fields, swamps, streams, things of that nature. Woods and forests also prevent movement at the double. That's twice your movement. If your leader point is in the forest, you ignore it for the purpose of checking your line of sight. You can draw a line of sight to a unit inside of a wood or forest, but they will be granted cover. And you cannot draw a line of sight through the woods to a unit that's standing behind them. And then our obstacles do not stop you from moving at the double unless you're charging. If you are charging and you go through it or end on top of it, you're considered hindered. They do provide cover, but they do not block line of sight. This is going to be things like low hedges, walls, things of that sort. Once all of the movement is complete, we move to the ranged phase of the active player's activations. So with that, a couple things. If you moved at the double, you're too exhausted from the march to prep and fire your weapons. And if you are engaged, so if you charged or have been charged, you can't shoot your guns or bows or whatever you have. And disordered units cannot use ranged attacks, which disordered, I think, is a result of a failed nerve test, maybe? We'll get to it. So your ranged weapons are going to list the range of the weapon, any special rules that it may have, and some may list a number of attacks that is different from the attack value of the unit. If it doesn't list the number of attacks, then you just use the unit's attack value. Picking your target is pretty basic. They have to be at least partially in the front arc. The unit has line of sight to it in that front arc, and the distance from the leader to the closest point is equal to or less than the weapon's range. And then once that target is established as a legal target, you roll dice equal to your attacks, or if the weapon has a separate attack value, the number of dice listed for that weapon. You get +1 as a modifier if you've received a halt order, so if you didn't move. You get -1 if they are in cover. A 1 is always a fail. If modifiers would take you beyond a 6 to hit, or to hit them, you can still roll, and a 6 will succeed, but you only roll half of your dice number and amount. You are looking for numbers that meet or beat the shoot value of the unit. Once you have sorted out how many of your shots will hit the target, we then need to pick up those successes and roll them again to see how much damage we deal to the target. On this roll, the target number is the defense of the target unit. And then at the end of the ranged phase, for any unit that took damage, they will have to take a nerve test, which will be explained at a later time. Also, you record the damage that you've dealt to the unit. You don't pull models in Kings of War games because of the multi-basing aspect. So you just place some tokens. They give you some nice flip side markers to keep up with all of those things. Which then brings us into the melee combat phase, where we're going to do all the hacking and slashing from our friends that did their charging during the movement phase. This is going to involve a roll to hit, a roll to damage, and a test of the enemy unit's nerve. The active player chooses a combat, you go through all the steps, then move to the next one. If it's a multi-combat, you would do steps 1 and 2, which is the roll to hit, roll to damage for all of the units, and then there would be a single nerve test. They don't have to take a nerve test for each unit that attacked them. It's just a singular nerve test for that combat. When you roll to hit, you are rolling a number of dice equal to their attack value. Flank attacks will get you double attacks, and rear attacks will get you a +1 modifier to hit. Hitting is done exactly the same as it is for ranged attacks. You're just looking for that target number of whatever your attack value is. Your modifiers are a +1 to hit if you're attacking from the rear, and a -1 to hit if you are hindered. And just like in the range phase, after you roll to hit, you get rid of your dice that missed, pick up your ones that hit, roll them again, and you're looking for their defense as your target number to inflict damage, and then record your damage, and then they have to take a nerve test if they took damage. If your mighty warriors do not manage to smite their enemies and rout them from the table, screaming and fleeing for their mothers, then there is a pushback. So they'll get pushed back 2 inches from all chargers to break off that melee. If the defending unit is unable to move, there's just not space there, then they become trapped. In that situation, the attacker instead moves an inch away, and the defender will then take another D3 worth of damage. That D3 does not trigger an additional nerve test. On the other hand, if your warriors were successful in vanquishing all of their foes down to the last man, showing no mercy and no quarter, then you have 3 options. You can regroup, which is to stay in place and pivot to face any direction. to fall back, which is to move backwards for D3 inches, or not affected by terrain, or to move forward, which is to go forward D3 inches, and you must move the full movement rolled when you do that. And each of those is going to be different, I guess, depending on your situation, where you are, what you've got going on. If a unit takes damage in the combat phase, they are considered then to be disordered, which means, and they will stay disordered until the end of their next turn, which means they cannot fire any ranged attacks, as they are far too busy fighting for their lives. And then we come to the explanation of the nerve test, which is very, very simple, and in a lot of ways reminds me a lot of Dragons Rampant, or maybe Dragons Rampant reminds me of Kings of War. But I played Dragons Rampant before Kings of War, so it's simple. So when you do your nerve test, you're rolling 2d6, and then you're adding however many points of damage are currently on the unit. If you are lower, the test is passed. If it's equal to or higher, then the test is failed and the unit is routed. Remove it from play. Units can also be devastated. So that's if their damage exceeds their nerve value, they become devastated, which causes them to half their attacks for both ranged and combat values. If they are healed in some way to where they're not above that threshold, the devastated effect falls off. If you roll double sixes, but still manage to pass the test, the end is nigh. So during that unit's next turn, the only actions that they can be given are halt, change facing, sidestep, or to move back. If you roll double ones, that is an epic, heroic success. The unit becomes implacable in the face of overwhelming odds. They pass the test automatically. If you're using those rerolls, if you had command tokens set aside, you're rerolling one of the dice, and it cannot be applied to a unit that is affected by the inspiring special rule, and you can only use one of those command tokens per nerve test. And you must declare the use of that token immediately after the test. You can't wait around and then come back and circle back. Oh, well, you know what? I think I want to. You got to do it right then. Second result stands, no matter what. We then come into our section for moving through the steps of taking those rules and using them to play a game. So get your boxes together, get your 2x4 foot gaming space set up, and determine a scenario, of which there are 6. I would like more, but 6 is kind of an average. Start the game by rolling a d6. High score can choose to be the attacker or defender. Roll. Once you sort out your scenario, place any objective tokens that the scenario calls for. Then the defender will choose 3 pieces of terrain, and the attacker will take the remaining terrain, 1 large and 1 small. So you should have 3 smalls, 2 larges on the board is the recommended amount of terrain. And starting with the defender, you go back and forth, placing those pieces of terrain until they are all on the board. Once the terrain is set up, starting with the attacker, you alternate deploying a single unit at a time into your deployment zone. When you look at the scenario descriptions, the attacker is red, the defender is blue. The attacker will be the first player in the first round. Both players gather your command tokens, and then the battle commences. Then it gives you some notes on terrain just as a reminder for what the various things do. Game lasts until a total of 6 rounds has been played or somebody gets wiped out. The scenario will describe the means of victory, so what you're going to get victory points for and how many victory points you're going to get for doing those things. With the objectives, they should be placed at least 6 inches apart and cannot be placed on blocking terrain. At the end of each round, if you have a unit that's within 3 of an objective with no enemies, you take control. A single unit can take control of any number of objectives, so there's no babysitting. You don't have to stay with the objective. You get it, and then it's yours until it is taken away from you by your opponent. If both players have an equal unit strength within 3 inches of the objective, then it's contested, so nobody gets it. There are also loot counters, which are both similar and different to the objective tokens. So they can be claimed at the end of any phase of your turn in which your unit is on top of or in contact with it, with no enemies. They carry it until they're wiped and drop it. They can choose to drop it at the start of any movement. While carrying a loot token, your speed is reduced by 1. They do not block movement or line of sight. Then we come into the descriptions of our scenarios. And then I think we're into fluff for the remainder of the book. Let's see, do they have let's go to the very, very back. No quick reference, but we do have lore, and I like that it seems common in most Mantic rulebooks. They put their rules at the front, their fluff at the back, which I like. It's not a huge thing, but I like it. I am personally very excited about this. Kings of War is something that I've wanted to have a go at for a while now and have been unable to for various reasons. Mostly related to the people that were going to teach me the game or that we were going to play the game just caught major life aggro and we were never able to get around to it. I do, and my original plan was to play regular Kings of War at 10mm because it's a lot easier to manage 2,000 points of 10mm than it is 2,000 points of 28mm. And I do have a fully printed and painted Abyssal Dwarf army for regular Kings of War. Just haven't been able to get it to the table. So I like this, especially for people that are either new to Wargaming or new to the Kings of War game, because it takes the pressure of list building off. You just buy the box, build the box, paint the box, and you're ready to play, which is good because then you can focus on learning the mechanics of the game. And if you like it and you want bigger, you can always take what you already have, buy more of the same faction, and incorporate that, what you've already got, into your future plans. It's a nice kind of scaling up option that makes it a little bit less daunting to ultimately play regular Kings of War if that's your goal. If that's not your goal, then you've got access to several different armies, factions, and play styles where you can kind of easily dip your toes into different things and try different stuff and have fun painting different models in different ways and different basing and all that stuff. So I'm for games like this, especially when they're from Mantic. I love Mantic. So I'm excited to finish painting. I have one more unit to paint in my second warband of the 3 that I currently have. So as soon as that last unit is done, I am going to do my best to get somebody over here to play this game with me. Thanks so much for tuning in, hanging out, letting me talk at you about Kings of War champions for a little bit today. I hope you have just an absolutely amazing rest of your day.